Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're at in the world. I'm Teacher Justin, and today we're taking a question from one of our viewers on how do we use TPR with older students. And it really is tricky, so we're going to go ahead and take a look at that today. So, first of all, when we're working with older students, we need to make sure that we're doing gestures that they're actually willing to copy. Because if you don't know anything about TPR, you know it's total physical response. What this means is that you actually get the student to respond, to reciprocate the gestures. And so do stuff that they're actually willing to reciprocate. More natural gestures, more toned down. Things that you would naturally do when you're talking, like I'm doing right now. And as you'll see with younger kids, you don't need to tell them twice to move. They're into it. They love it. They have fun with that. But typically, you start working with older students and you get this reaction. I'm not into that. That's not how I learn, etc. And so we have to change things a little bit, especially in the beginning. We have to start with something simple and natural and easy. And as the lesson moves on, or perhaps if you have a regular student, they'll learn to love gestures. You can learn to love gestures. So remember, starting with natural gestures. These can be things like the peace sign. You won't want to use your whole hands. You want to just kind of keep it simple and small. But you go from this and other what we call emblems, like the thumbs up. These are almost like sign language, like a cultural type of gesture that you use. This right here, hang loose. In China, actually, this is when you count to 6. You do it on one hand. So you start using these gestures that they do anyways. The okay is totally okay in China, for example. This is not okay, right? But you can use these gestures that we use day in, day out as gateway gestures to break the ice, to open their mind up to the idea that actually using gestures can be fun. And that's where you want to try to get them into that space. But in the beginning, you're definitely not, you're going to need to help them understand why is it that you're wanting them to use gestures. It's so important to explain that. As these kids get older, they're going to want to know why you're doing something. And so you explain it to them. It will help you learn. You can also say it will help you remember. But to say it'll help you learn is actually, I think, a little bit better, and I'll explain that why later. But you let them know it'll help you learn. It'll help you remember. You could also take the angle of, in my country, in America, we like to use our hands when we talk. What about in China? And now all of a sudden gestures are actually a gateway to have a cultural exchange, to really open their mind and expand their worldview. And hey, if all else fails, you can always just tell them, hey, I'm the teacher, this is how the lesson goes, so go ahead and use your hands. Obviously, this would be the last resort, right? You don't want to do this. You don't want to pull the teacher card and just say, hey, do it because I'm telling you. So you want to make sure you go through those other ones first. And if you really sense that the movement's going to make a big difference, then naturally, you can kind of just always press them. So those first two elements there are guidelines, essentially, of when you're working with older students. Remember that you need to be using more approachable gestures as you start out, more natural gestures, and then explain why you're actually wanting them to move along with you. Now let's take a look here at these other two examples, which are the types of gestures that we might use. The first one here, I want you to really hold on to this image of the dog, okay? Because you notice this dog is sprinting as fast as he can. When this comes into a story with one of your students, they say sprint, what is that? That means run fast. Sometimes to keep all this stuff straight is actually pretty hard. So this is a wonderful opportunity to use TPR, not just to help them remember, but to learn, to clarify, right? That you have run and sprint. And then you can encourage them to do that along with you. Or you might have trot, right? Trot, run, sprint. And then you have them do that back to you. Sprint, run, trot. And it's such an easy, fun way to get them involved in an approachable way that makes them more clear, it helps them remember, it helps them learn, and you can explain this to them. And they can see that it helps them learn because it's helping them clarify what's being said. Whether that's to run and sprint or to jump or leap, it will help them understand the lesson better, and that's something that they can feel. Right? It's not so obvious for us that it's going to help us remember, but it's obvious whenever it helps you clarify. So any action verbs or any type of synonyms, things that are related, it also is great for frequency words. Sometimes, always. So as you're prepping, it's very important that you start to look out for what kind of words lend themselves well to TPR, especially ones that have two related concepts. So if we're learning a synonym of something that we already know, we can help use TPR to differentiate between the two. So to our last point here, as students get older, reading becomes more of a chore. So TPR can be a really great tool to use when you're looking at reading, principally because These kids get a little freaked out when they don't get things right, when they make mistakes. And when you're reading, especially in English, as the words get longer and bigger, spelling becomes crazy, you're not sure how to pronounce words, and so this is a way that you can approach reading that sort of hits the reset button, getting their hands moving a little bit. Because. So 2-syllable words are great for that. You can have multiple syllable words like alligator, and encourage them to clap with you, to feel the syllables, and just to make it more interesting, to keep them alive, to keep them alert, to keep them focused. It gets their blood pumping, for goodness sakes. And of course, you can always explain to them why you're doing it. Helps them learn, helps them remember. Pointing is terrific for feeling not only stressed syllables, but stressed words in a longer sentence, right? I went to school last summer. You can use more of a natural gesture like we talked about earlier. I went to school last summer. And encourage them to use their hand, right? In America, we use our hands when we talk. In China, do you use your hands? Yes? Yeah, okay, so with your hand, I went to school last summer. And encourage them to do that so they can feel those strong beats in the sentence. It's talking about stress and intonation too. You can encourage them to ride the horse. I went to school last summer. Most older kids, when you ask them to do this, they're going to look at you strange. So remember, it's not about right out of the gates asking them to do this stuff, but having that gradual release where you start with something natural, something that they would do anyways, and then as time moves on, you can move into those more prototypical TPR, like running and sit and jump and leap. And you have these motions that will not only make it fun for them, whether they admit it or not, they will have more fun. It gets their blood pumping, keeps them focused, and it helps clarify the situation. So these are some examples and some guidelines on using TPR with older students and having success with it, because I'm telling you, TPR is the key to success, especially in the online classroom when we need to sort of take back what we lose from the brick and mortar world. So thanks for tuning in. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. I'm always looking for new ideas, so help me out. Let me know what's on your mind. And until next time, happy teaching.